Hi guys, today I'm going to be sharing my testimony with you. I'm going to be talking about when I met Jesus, how he's worked in my life, and kind of why I choose to follow him. Okay, so if you're in the Christian sphere or have ever heard a testimony or two, you've definitely heard the term. So I grew up in a Christian household, and I hate to say it, but that's how I'm going to start too. So, grew up in a Christian household, definitely went to church, elementary and middle school every Sunday, and was very involved as my dad worked at the church, and so that was a big part of my life. With that, I did get baptized when I was, I think, 7 or 8, but I don't really count that as my when I met Jesus moment. I'm not sure my intentions behind getting baptized, and I don't really remember if it was super important to me at the time. But yeah, I'll talk about later when I believe I truly became a Christian, which is in 8th grade. I went to that same church, elementary, and then the beginning of middle school. And I think it was in 6th or 7th grade. My friend Tana, who I grew up down the street from, invited me to this thing called Tasame at her church. And so I started going there, and it was super awesome because the structure of Tasame was that you would have high school mentors having a small group with middle schoolers. So it was foundationally based on mentorship and leading, younger people than you to Christ, while also having, fun and camaraderie, especially, in a youth group with crazy, full of energy children. As we all know, middle school isn't always the easiest time. And for me, I really struggled with loneliness and not feeling like I fit in. I think I struggled with perfectionism and feeling like a failure a lot of the time. And in addition with that, my parents kind of had a rocky relationship growing up, and so it was difficult for me not having any siblings to be able to kind of talk to or rely on when things were kind of difficult for me. So I remember a lot of nights in middle school I would lay in my bed not being able to sleep for hours and hours, just overthinking and sometimes journaling and really crying a lot, just about life and dealing with mental health, honestly. I know people have thoughts about, diagnosing kids at such a young age, but I really did struggle with mental health in middle school, even though it wasn't identified until way later in my life. There was a situation in middle school that led my parents to get me in counseling. And so one thing I just want to touch on from counseling that I vividly remember saying was that there was no point in life. I was like, life seems like check boxes. You go to school, you graduate, you get a job, maybe have a family, and then you die. That doesn't sound appealing to me. It sounds like these things that sound hard and like work, and nothing will ever be easy or perfect, and that is really hard for me to understand. And being as a 12, 13-year-old girl saying those things, I'm like, where was my head at? Seriously. But yes, this plays into later, my 8th grade year, when I say Jesus actually became a part of my life. So I truly met Jesus and became a Christ follower in 8th grade when I was at a picnic table at a Christian camp that will forever hold the most special place in my heart. Oh my goodness. So the camp is called Upon the Rock, and I'm gonna link their website and stuff in the bio. It's an amazing camp in Colorado. Essentially, the week of camp, me and my 3 closest friends were having a really hard time. We were having a ton of drama, not being able to have fun. There was just a lot of division, and essentially the counselors were like, all right, we're done with this. And they brought us to this picnic table and had to have this long talk with us. And I just remember chatting about a lot of hard things and just kind of diving into why this division was occurring. And long into the conversation, I remember I just really got emotional, and I kind of blurted out and was like, you know what? I don't even know if I believe in God. And you guys, as those words were coming out of my mouth, I remember I saw this overhead view, from God's point of view, seeing my little middle school self sitting in my bed, crying, staying up late, overthinking, journaling, calling out to anything that could help me. And yeah, it was seriously just this image in my mind that told me God was there. God had seen you in those moments. And I just yeah, I just remember breaking down and crying. And as those words, I don't even know if I believe in God, came out of my mouth, it was like, I do believe in God. And I just remember questioning, what if there is purpose in life? What if the reason I'm here is to follow Jesus and to make him known? What if there is a point to my life rather than checking those boxes off and doing things that have no point? And then the most amazing thing, after talking with the counselors and our youth pastor and just like them bringing my heart to Jesus pretty much, we turned around the corner from where the picnic bench or from where the picnic table was, and it was the most beautiful sunset I've ever seen in my life. And that was just like the cherry on top of the most perfect night, where I just saw like God is here, and it was like blue and pink and orange and just the most beautiful Colorado mountain sunset. And yeah, it was like a weight had been lifted off of me and true joy had been injected right into my bloodstream. I was like, oh my gosh, I have a purpose. My life means something. And yeah, I get so passionate talking about this because it is one instance in my life where I know I felt true, real, God-breathed joy. Oh, it was the best. Yeah, and I have to reflect on that more, because as I've grown older and as, you know, things have been hard and challenges have happened in my life, I forget that God brought me from this purposeless life that I was living in, brought me into a life where I can know that I have eternal value and that I can bring other people with me to heaven. Okay, now that I shared with you guys the story of when I became a Christian, I'm going to chat about 3 instances in my life where I've seen God's faithfulness in really difficult things. Okay, so the first part of my life where I've really seen God work has been in my relationship with Jaden. So heading into high school, I kind of made a commitment to myself and to the Lord that I didn't want to date in high school, because no guy has the right intentions, high school relationships never last, no high school boy is going to be chasing God the way that I want my boyfriend to. And so yeah, I kind of made that deal with myself. Lo and behold, I'm now married to Jaden from high school. But I upheld that essentially. We did never officially date in high school, but all of my friends and everyone would say that we basically did date, which is true. But yeah, he officially asked me out our last day of high school, and then we did 3 years of long distance in college. I was at Azusa Pacific University in Southern California. At first he was at CSU in Colorado, then transferred to GCU in Arizona. So long distance was one of the hardest dang things I've ever done. It was such a challenge for me, especially freshman year of college, when I didn't have any friends, moving into a new state and not knowing anyone. And I didn't have my boyfriend, who I was very in love with and wanted to be around all the time. So yeah, one revolutionary thing that came out of, you know, the long distance and struggle with starting college was getting on mental health medication. So this is a whole different video, but I have struggled with gut health issues for like forever. And I went to the doctors at one point and I was like, my stomach is killing me so bad. Like, I won't go into the details, but it was horrible. So she kind of asked me, is there any, you know, stressors going on in your life? Do you think you deal with any anxiety, depression, things like that? And I was like, yeah, that could probably be it. And she was like, okay, my recommendation for you is to 1, start going to counseling, 2, get on medication for your mental health. And that was one of the hardest things I've ever heard. I didn't want to acknowledge that I did have mental illness, and yeah, it was difficult. I felt like I was a failure of a Christian, that I wasn't believing in God enough, that I wasn't having the joy of the Lord enough, and all of these things. But long story short, I started taking mental health medication, and that has been one of the biggest transformative things in my life, to be able to be secure in myself and to love others better. Another aspect of my relationship with Jaden that reflects the Lord's goodness is our journey with purity and struggling with sin, having a really difficult time being together for so long and trying to honor what the Lord desires for a marriage relationship. So yeah, I don't want to go into too much detail of that, but that's another thing where we really saw God's goodness and forgiveness reflected in our lives. Okay, second aspect of my life where I've really seen God work is with my mental health, which I touched on before. Definitely heavily struggle with anxiety and then kind of have like moderate depression that comes and goes. With that, I think there is a lot of difficulty in church culture where people can be pretty harsh and say that it's your fault, that it's a result of your sin, that you're not praying enough. Things like that can be very difficult for someone to hear who's struggling so badly with mental illness. And so, yeah, it's been a mission of mine to try and talk about mental health and break the stigma, especially in the church culture. And yeah, it brings me a lot of joy to be able to stand up and say, like, I have mental illness, I take medication, and I'm still a faithful follower of the Lord. Like, that doesn't change my belief in God. During my senior year of college, I actually was hospitalized at one point, and that's a really long experience that I could talk about if you guys are interested. So just comment down below, let me know if you want to hear more about that. Third aspect of my life where I've seen God move has been in my family. During COVID, things kind of unraveled a little bit, and then eventually, months later, my parents did end up separating and then got a divorce about a year after. And so that is something that, although divorce, is a super hard thing, in my eyes, it was actually a blessing from my family to give my parents a new start, to give me peace, knowing that they're able to live their lives separately. And so I'm really thankful for the Lord and how He placed His hand on the healing of my family. Although some may say that divorce probably isn't healing, I would disagree for my situation. Okay, before I wrap up my testimony video, gotta open up the good old book. I'm just gonna share a few verses that have been really impactful in my walk with God. First verse I want to share is Psalm 86:5, which says, "For you, O Lord, are kind and ready to forgive, abounding in love to all who call to you." I love this verse because it just shows the open arms of Jesus and of God saying, "Come into my presence, allow me to be your refuge and to be your safe place. I will forgive you because of Jesus' blood. You have been set free." It's a simple verse, but I think it just represents a lot. Okay, the next ones I want to share are also in Psalm, and they are Psalm 18:16 through 19. It says, "He reached down from on high and took hold of me. He pulled me out of deep water. He rescued me from my powerful enemy and from those who hated me, for they were too strong for me. They confronted me in my day of calamity, but the Lord was my support. He brought me out to a spacious place. He rescued me because He delighted in me." That last part, He rescued me because He delighted in me. That gives me chills, brings tears to my eyes, all of the things. God wants to just scoop you up, hold you in His arms, and say, "You are mine." He rescues us because He loves us, because He delights in us, and He cares for us. This kind of leads into my tattoo right here. It says rescue. It comes from this verse and many other verses in the Bible that talk about God rescuing us, especially in my struggle with mental health, knowing that eventually when heaven comes, God is going to ultimately rescue me from the pain that I felt during this lifetime. The last verse I want to touch on is in Romans 8, and it's verse 1. It says, "Therefore, there is now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus." This just represents to me in my struggle with guilt and shame that God does not condemn me. For me, when I put my faith in Jesus Christ and said, "Lord, you have paid it all for me," I've been set free. I do not have to live in guilt and shame anymore. There is no more striving for perfection. There is no more striving to achieve goodness or impress other people. I am living for an audience of one, and that is for the Lord only. Man, oh man, I love to talk about God. I was so nervous at the beginning of starting this video, but now I just feel so good and reminded of God's goodness. So yeah, thank you guys so much for listening to my testimony. I would love to talk more about my faith or faith in general. If you guys would like to see more of that, comment down below, and I'll see you in the next video.